Hello, everyone. Welcome to Small Talk. Well, joining me today is Dave Toner. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Thanks for having me, Nancy.
Or David. Do you go by David?
Generally, Dave.
Sorry, my apologies.
That's okay.
I knew that, and I practiced that this morning, remembering your name. Then I forgot. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I'm wondering how many of you remember hearing about the guardian angels? This would have been, I think, back in the 1970s in New York City. Now, what I remember hearing about them is that they would ride the subway, and the whole idea was to prevent crime. And then as news stories go, you hear about them for a while and then nothing. So I'm wondering, are they still existing? So I think Dave Toner knows something about that, right, David?
Yeah, and maybe I should just give you some background, Nancy,
Sure.
how I got involved with it. In 2005, my wife and I unfortunately lost our son to a violent crime. He was 16 years old, and our son Matthew was near the SkyTrain station in Surrey and was randomly attacked and beaten, and as a result of his injuries, died.
Right.
And of course, that left our family reeling, and eventually what happened as a result of the grief and the anger, I guess, and general frustration with the justice system and everything else was our desire to do something about it, right?
Right.
So that led us down the path of kind of public service and what can we do and how can we be more engaged and involved in our community. And eventually, about a year later, in 2006, I happened to be reading some articles online and I found a mention of the guardian angels. And I had heard of them before. There's sort of a urban myth, folklore, yes. Almost sort of a status. And I reached out to Curtis Sliwa, the guy who invented them and started the group in New York City back in the 70s. And I sent him an email and explained the background and our story and what had happened and expressed some interest. And strangely enough, the Guardian Angels chapter was established in Vancouver in the late 80s. Oh, there was a chapter and it had sort of gone dormant after a couple of years.
Right.
It's all volunteer based. People come and go
Sure.
based on their work life issues and stuff. And, so the chapter in Vancouver had gone dormant. And when I explained to Curtis the situation and I'd like to get involved, that led to a series of phone calls back and forth. And we were talking and he was getting to know me and everything. And eventually he said, well, would you like to reignite the chapter and get it started again? And in fact, would you like to lead it? So I wound up being the lead of the chapter.
Oh, all right.
And it, serendipity, I guess. Things just sort of fell into place. My own professional background, I had some qualification for that. I'm a security expert and I have a background in martial arts. So it sort of led into that position being a perfect fit. So I started, putting out the word, putting out emails and talking to people that I knew. Social media was just sort of starting to be a big thing then in 2006. So we put it out there that we were interested in doing this, and lo and behold, people started putting their hand up and saying, "Yeah, I'm kind of interested in that, and I'd like to see what I can do to help in my community." And that's how I got involved.
Right. So, what exactly do they do?
As you mentioned earlier, they basically patrol. In New York, it was initially focused on the subways because they had a huge crime problem there. But they basically are a community patrol group. Yeah. All volunteer based. And they go out into communities, and there's been kind of a negative stigma attached to this as a result of a couple of situations that resulted mostly back in the late 80s and early 90s in the States, and the word vigilante was thrown around. And that's the negative side of things. There's always good and bad with everything. For the most part, though, the group is very well organized, very well run. And they followed pretty strict rules about what you were allowed to do and weren't allowed to do. And I think that the benefit of having engagement of the community in groups like that, and whether it's the Guardian Angels or any of the other multitude of
like the neighborhood watch,
citizens on patrol, there's a variety of things. What sort of made them stand out was the fact that they wore these red berets. It was sort of a uniform. But really what they're doing is no different than any of the other community groups that are out there that have an interest in making their communities and their neighborhoods a safer place to be. And we all want safety for our children, especially with what happened to us, right? And I think that that's the message that I want to convey today, is that as citizens, we all need to take more responsibility in what's going on. You've probably noticed that often now in neighborhoods, we don't even know who our neighbors are. We live with blinders on. We focus on our jobs, our needs, our families. Neighbors don't even talk to each other. If something happens down the street, people go, "Oh, it's not my business.
Yeah,
it's not my concern," right?
Right.
I think we need to do the opposite. We need to be more engaged.
I agree.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying be a vigilante and take justice into your own hands. All I'm saying is be a voice. And if you see something wrong, speak up.
Right.
And if you're afraid to speak up for personal safety reasons, you know, if it's something violent or aggressive and you know you're not qualified and not trained to get into that, then don't. But definitely pick up the phone and call 911 and cooperate with the police if they're investigating. That's the other thing that really bothers me about modern society is there's been this wall put up because, again, of some very limited numbers of instances where the police have done something wrong. There's this police negativity in society now that the cops are our enemy and they're bad guys. They're not. They're good people and neighbors just like us who are trying to do a very difficult and thankless job.
Right, absolutely. And like any organization, whatever you go, there are going to be a few rotten apples. It's just unavoidable, right?
Absolutely. There's bad doctors, there's bad lawyers, there's bad truck drivers.
But you don't paint them with all the same brush.
They're not all the same. It's unfair to do that. I know personally have lots of friends who are police officers and are great people.
Right.
So the actions of a couple of bad ones shouldn't taint the entire profession, right?
Yeah.
And I think people need to break down that wall, stop listening to the negative stereotypes, and start cooperating. If there's an investigation into something that went wrong, don't be afraid to speak up and participate in that and make things right. Because the problem with apathy, and I've said this many times, is when we start to be apathetic and ignore what's happening, it only makes the problem worse, right?
Yeah. If you can relate to, say, your family, you'll have somebody in your family who maybe does illegal things or whatever, right? You don't want everybody thinking your whole family is like that. So just put it on a bigger level.
Yeah.
On a bigger scale.
Yeah. Yeah. And people need to think of the good of the community as opposed to their own personal, ambitions.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I know, especially older people who so afraid of getting involved or saying anything, It's like they think it's going to have some adverse effect on them. And the opposite is true. And it's like, how do you get them to listen?
Yeah, it's a tough battle, right? And I know that sometimes fear can be very pervasive, right? And it makes people not want to participate. But as I said earlier, you don't have to personally jump in. I'm not recommending that you try to be John Wayne if you're not, right? Or maybe a more modern example, don't be Rambo if you're not.
There you go.
Right? But anybody can pick up a phone and call 911, or even online now, you can report things online anonymously. There's the Crime Stoppers program, for example, is an anonymous program that allows you to give information and not be public about it, right?
Well, one of the things were happening a lot in Chilliwack anyway, I'm sure they're not just here, but there's this group that I call them a gang of thugs, but they go around with their signs and they'll be in front of people that they don't agree with, like in front of the school board and stuff like that. And yet nobody stops them. Nobody does anything about that. Who has authority? What should be done? Can anything be done? That's a really good example, I think, of people out there bullying. Because they're a group, would they do it individually? I don't think so.
No.
Strength
in numbers, right?
Yeah, a bunch of cowards is actually.
And that's, people have used the term public advocacy and social justice has been a term that's coined lately. And you have to be careful how you use that because unfortunately, there's been groups out there, political-based groups often, who are doing things in the name of social justice. And you could very easily look at their actions. They're committing acts of violence. They're intimidating other people. They're getting their way by use of force. That meets all the definitions of domestic terrorism.
Right.
So those people shouldn't be considered social justice advocates. They're thugs and they're terrorists.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're hiding behind a political agenda to get what they want.
Right. So let's get back to you and bringing in being head of the Canadian, was that the Vancouver chapter?
Vancouver chapter.
Vancouver chapter. Are they still active?
They again went kind of dormant. I wound up leaving the group after a couple of years because another avenue opened up that I thought would be more effective, and that was political, the avenue. So my wife and I started a group called Families Against Crime and Trauma to represent families like ours that had been the victim of violent crime and weren't being adequately represented in the justice system.
Right.
The problem or the hurdle that we faced with the Guardian Angels is it's very grassroots. It's you need people to go with you to go out on patrol and get things done on the street. The number of people who are able or capable of doing that are relatively limited.
Oh, okay.
When we moved into the social advocacy avenue of things, that was a much broader group. We had a huge number of supporters then in the thousands. So we were able to accomplish a lot more, and we were able to create political change. You know, legislation and provincial laws were changed because of the lobbying that we did.
Right.
We were able to, help gain traction for victims of crime and elevate that to a much higher level than it was before, where judges are now recognizing there's a Victims of Crime Restitution Act that's used to help families who've been victimized by violent crimes and have no financial means to, even something as simple as burying their loved ones who've been lost, right?
Right.
And holding people who perpetuate violent crimes financially accountable.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
So there was some benefit to taking it to a much larger avenue and dealing with provincial government and federal government and trying to get things done that way rather than just being boots on the ground walking the streets.
Right, right. So what is it you currently do?
Currently, we've moved away from the political end of it. After almost 15 years of doing that, it's left us burnt out, I guess, is the way to put it. And we found that we were actually re-victimizing ourselves to some degree by going through that over and over and over again and being in the courts and representing other families in the media and in their political battles as well for justice. So right now we've taken a much more in the community sort of approach. We feed families, we help the people who are the most disenfranchised and victimized people in society. We help collect donations. We're out there helping people with addictions, people who are dealing with the struggles of life. You know, as you know, the last few years have been very hard on everybody. And we found the need for people in the community who just care and approach everything with kindness and empathy. And that's the direction that we're working with now. We're working with a lot of local groups here in Chilliwack, the Chilliwack Free Store, for example, food banks, various church outreach groups. We're trying to spread ourselves out in several different directions and help. We don't want to be just one thing anymore. We want to help a little in all sorts of ways. They say you can't change the world, but you can change the world for one person.
Yes, absolutely.
If you can change the world for one person, then you've made a difference.
You know what I'm finding, at least here in Chilliwack, that there are more and more groups, organizations helping those that need help.
Yes.
Like it seems to be building.
Yes.
Which is really very exciting.
We started a little thing we called the Random Act of Kindness a few years ago in honor of our son's memory. We went out and on his birthday decided, he's not with us. Let's go out and do something. So we went into a grocery store and we noticed a young mom with her kids and we got behind her in the lineup. And when it came time for her to pay, we jumped in and said, hey, can we cover the cost of this for you? And she was just so emotional and grateful that some random strangers had stepped in and done this kind thing for her. And it kind of picked up and then we posted it on the internet on a social media group and it gained traction. And now on that day every year on Matthew's birthday, we have people all over the world messaging us saying, hey, we did our random act of kindness today. I bought a stranger coffee. I gave a meal to a homeless person. I bought groceries for a struggling parent. I did this, I did that, whatever the case may be. We just want to continue honoring our son's memory and do it in a way that promotes kindness and compassion and empathy in the world.
I think it's great. I think like this, the whole kindness thing is so it like it's a win-win.
Absolutely.
For the person doing it and for the person on the receiving end, right?
Yeah. I mean, it costs you nothing to be kind, really.
Yeah, for sure.
But it benefits the other person immediately in a very real sense, in
Right.
some case. It benefits you for the state of your mental well-being, your spiritual well-being, if you will, whatever you want to way you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
It makes you a better person by doing that.
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, like that anybody who's on the giving end, it's like, let people know how exciting it is to be the giver.
Absolutely.
It makes you, for me, it gets me excited. It really does.
It does. Yeah. And it's contagious. People see it.
Yeah.
And they say, I can do that too.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't, nothing major, but a small act of kindness goes a long way.
Yeah.
Complimenting somebody, hey, I like your coat. It's really nice.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
I just do that, if ever when I get the chance to go to like Superstore, I don't drive, so I'd have to get a ride. But the grocery cart that you put the money in,
yeah.
I said to my dad, leave it, let the next person have it. Like, what? It's only like $1, right? If you can afford to put it in there, you can afford to leave it there.
Absolutely.
And just things like that are just so simple because you don't know who comes behind you and might not have that dollar.
Absolutely. And it can be financial. It can be just something as simple as holding the door. I've noticed, if people just hold the door open for the person behind them, it makes them feel a little bit better about the rest of the day. If they say hi, if they smile and make eye contact. Too often, I think, again, that perception of fear that people live with, they're afraid to look at people. They're afraid to acknowledge other people. If we go through life with blinders on, then we really are blind.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is all wonderful. Okay, so so you said that the guardian angels are dormant at the moment, right? But could somebody get them going again, you think?
Sure. I mean, it's like any other group that it's volunteer based, so
of course,
it's based on interest and people who are willing to be active. The issue that I had and when I left them, it was basically just lack of traction. We were out there doing patrols, but I felt it wasn't really making a big enough difference.
Okay.
We needed more people, and we needed more people to be engaged. And if anything gets big enough and has enough followers and supporters, and whether it be the Guardian Angels or any other organization, there's all kinds of excellent groups out there doing great work in communities. My message to people today, if they ask me, well, how do I make a difference in the world, is the first thing you have to do is take action, do something.
Do something. Right? And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter how big, how small.
How big or small, but do something.
Right, do something.
And then you can look at yourself in the mirror at the end of the day and say, I made a difference.
Yeah, and now you can feel good about yourself, right?
Right.
Well, that's maybe a good spot to end it. So, so thank you everybody for listening. You've been listening to David Toner, not Dave, like I introduced him at the beginning. And I said it twice after that, like, oh my gosh. Oh, this is what happens when you have a senior brain. You have these, I'm having these all day senior moments. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching the show. I really appreciate it. I hope you continue to do so. Take care, everybody, and peace out. Now we can find the off button.